What if the most explosive political secret of the decade was just released, and it came from someone no one expected? Brace yourself, because Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has just shaken Washington to its core.
It started with one sentence that shook Washington to its core. America deserves to hear the truth. Those 10 simple words spoken by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett were enough to send shockwaves through the entire political world. Within minutes, her statement was everywhere, plastered across social media, flashing on TV screens, and discussed in late-night newsroom meetings. Journalists, politicians, and even former White House aides were all asking the same thing. What truth was she talking about? And then came the answer. A few words that made the entire Capitol freeze. Late last night, Crockett's team officially released what they called the Trump immigration recording. It was a short audio clip allegedly captured during a private meeting at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence months earlier. At first, people didn't know what to think. Some believed it was just another rumor, maybe a political stunt, maybe a misquote. But once the recording started spreading, it became clear this wasn't just gossip. This was something far more serious. The recording, if proven authentic, could completely change what we know about Trump's immigration agenda. The secret, behind-the-scenes version of it that never made it to the campaign speeches or public statements. And let's be honest, America has heard Donald Trump talk about immigration before. He's made headlines for years with his strong border rhetoric. But this time, it wasn't a rally or an interview. This was Trump off camera, speaking privately, unfiltered, and surrounded only by his inner circle. That's what made the leak so explosive. The night it all broke. The night it all broke. It was close to midnight when the news first appeared online. A small post from Crockett's verified account, short, calm, and direct, no hashtags, no exaggeration, just a caption that read, "The people have a right to know." Attached to it was a single audio clip, about 1 minute long. Within minutes, it was shared thousands of times. By the next hour, it had gone viral. You could hear Trump's voice, unmistakable, even through the static, talking about what sounded like an immigration strategy meeting. His tone was sharp, commanding, and cold. "We were too soft last time," the voice said. "Next time, we do it tougher, much tougher." Then there was a pause, a rustling of papers, and then another sentence. "If they don't like it, they can leave, all of them." The moment those words hit the internet, chaos erupted. The internet explodes. Twitter, or X, lit up instantly. Hashtags like #TrumpRecording, Crockett leaks, and Mar-a-Lago audio were trending worldwide within an hour. Some called it the political leak of the decade. Others dismissed it as fake audio or AI-generated noise. But whether people believed it or not, everyone was listening. Commentators replayed it over and over. Audio experts started analyzing it, trying to confirm if the voice really belonged to Donald Trump. Some said the tone and rhythm were a perfect match. Others urged caution, saying the clip needed a full forensic review. Cable news channels switched into breaking news mode. CNN called it a stunning release from Representative Crockett. Fox News called it a desperate stunt to grab attention. But behind the talking points, one thing was clear: the voice in that clip sounded very real. And it wasn't just what Trump said, it was how he said it: confident, dismissive, almost proud. For millions of Americans who heard it that night, it was like being given a secret window into what really happens when the microphones are off. Jasmine Crockett's bold move. Now, Jasmine Crockett isn't new to controversy. She's fiery, outspoken, and not afraid to challenge powerful people. But this was something entirely different. Releasing a recording like that wasn't just risky, it was dangerous. By morning, her statement was everywhere. Standing on the Capitol steps, surrounded by cameras, she addressed the nation. "This isn't about party lines or politics," she said. "This is about accountability. When leaders speak about people as if they're disposable, when they talk about using power to intimidate, we need to know. The American people deserve transparency. Her voice was calm, but her message was fierce. Supporters praised her for being brave enough to pull back the curtain. Critics accused her of breaking the law, of leaking something illegally obtained. But Crockett didn't back down. In fact, she doubled down. If telling the truth is a crime, she said, then maybe the problem isn't with the truth, it's with the people hiding it. The big question. As the clip continued spreading, one question echoed everywhere. Why now? Why would Jasmine Crockett choose this moment to release the recording? Was it to expose Trump ahead of the next election? Or was it something bigger? A genuine attempt to make Americans see what happens behind the polished speeches and political slogans? No one knows for sure. But what everyone agrees on is this. The recording has already done its job. It started a firestorm that shows no sign of slowing down. The halls of Congress are buzzing, newsrooms are in overdrive, and voters across the country are suddenly asking hard questions about truth, power, and leadership. And at the center of it all stands Jasmine Crockett, the Congresswoman who looked straight into the camera and said, "America deserves to hear the truth." That sentence didn't just trend. It became a line that history might never forget. According to insiders, the meeting took place in the grand dining room of Mar-a-Lago, one of Donald Trump's most private spaces, far away from the public eye, late one evening, long after the cameras had gone and the guests had left. The chandeliers glowed softly above a long, polished table set with untouched glasses of water and scattered folders marked "Confidential." The air was heavy with strategy and ego, a room where words carried weight and every glance meant something. Trump sat at the head of the table, confident, animated, and surrounded by a handful of his most trusted confidants. Among them were a few longtime business donors, 2 political advisors from his early campaign days, and at least one familiar face from his previous administration. On the surface, it looked like another routine political strategy session, the kind of behind-closed-doors meeting every political figure has from time to time. But, according to the now infamous leaked audio, what started as strategy soon took a much darker turn. The words that shook the room. The recording begins with casual chatter, the clinking of glasses, the shuffling of papers, muffled laughter. But then Trump's tone shifts. His voice lowers, firm and commanding. "We've been too soft on immigration," he says. "Next time, it has to be tougher, much tougher. If they don't like it, they can leave. All of them." The room, which had moments ago been filled with chatter, suddenly falls silent. Someone in the background, perhaps a nervous aide, lets out a short, uneasy laugh. But Trump doesn't laugh back. His tone hardens. "People think we need compassion," he continues. "What we really need is control, and if that means detention camps, then so be it." The sound of chairs shifting is faintly heard. One person coughs. Another murmurs something under their breath that the microphone doesn't quite catch. It's the kind of silence that fills a room when everyone realizes they've just crossed into dangerous territory, where politics ends and something else begins. The fallout inside the room. According to one source who later spoke under condition of anonymity, the mood changed instantly. They described it as a chilling moment, not just because of what was said, but because of how confidently it was said. He wasn't joking, the source explained. He wasn't spitballing. It sounded like a plan. The idea of mass detention, of using control instead of compassion, was more than rhetoric. It was, at least in that room, a real topic of discussion. Some of the attendees reportedly nodded quietly, unsure whether to agree or stay silent. A few even tried to steer the conversation back to safer political ground, talking about border technology, visa reforms, or public messaging.
But Trump, according to the audio, didn't seem interested in policy details. He was focused on power, on the optics of strength. People love strength, he said in one part of the recording. They don't respect weakness, not in America, not anywhere. The leak that changed everything. The recording, though not yet officially authenticated, has already sent shockwaves through Washington. When news of the leak first hit, political commentators couldn't believe it. Some thought it was AI generated. Others assumed it was a hoax. But as more audio experts began to analyze the voice patterns and tone, many agreed. It sounded undeniably like Donald Trump. Democrats quickly condemned the remarks, calling them a chilling reminder of Trump's willingness to dehumanize entire communities. Civil rights groups released statements saying the comments reflected the same authoritarian mindset that had surfaced during his previous term. Even among Republicans, the silence was deafening. A few quietly told reporters off camera that they were deeply disturbed, but none dared say it publicly. Crockett's courage. And that's exactly what made Jasmine Crockett's move so bold. Most politicians would have backed away. Most would have waited for official confirmation before daring to take a stance. But Crockett didn't wait. She went straight to the public, releasing the audio and declaring, "Americans deserve transparency. They deserve to know what kind of leadership is being discussed behind closed doors." It was a high-risk decision. She knew there would be backlash. She knew Trump's supporters would attack her character, her motives, even her credibility. But she also knew that if she stayed silent, the truth might never come out. And within hours, her gamble paid off. The story became front-page news. In one day, a private conversation inside Mar-a-Lago had become a national reckoning about power, truth, and the moral boundaries of leadership. The bigger question. But even as America debated the meaning of those words, control, detention camps, tougher immigration, a deeper question began to form. Who leaked the recording? Was it someone in that room, disgusted by what they heard? Or was it a calculated move by a former insider looking to expose Trump before his next campaign? No one knows for sure. What's clear, though, is that the moment Trump said those words, he created a storm that couldn't be contained. And as Jasmine Crockett stood before cameras the next morning, her voice steady and fearless, one truth became undeniable. She hadn't just released a recording, she had released a reckoning.
For weeks, Washington had been buzzing with whispers. Rumors swirled through backroom meetings, private text chains, and late-night talk shows that someone inside Congress had gotten their hands on a confidential recording tied directly to Donald Trump's inner circle. At first, almost nobody believed it. In a city where secrets and scandals appear every other week, most assumed it was just another political rumor, something that would fade by morning. But then, everything changed. Because the person behind the leak, the one who decided to step forward, wasn't just anyone. It was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. And the moment she spoke, Washington went silent. The press conference that shook the nation. It happened on a crisp morning outside the U.S. Capitol. Reporters had been camped out for hours, cameras pointed toward an empty podium, wondering if the whispers were true. And then, suddenly, the doors opened. Out stepped Jasmine Crockett, wearing a sharp navy suit and holding a small folder in her hand. Her expression was calm, her stride deliberate. The flash of cameras filled the air. The noise of reporters calling her name echoed across the marble steps, but she didn't flinch. When she reached the podium, she looked straight into the sea of microphones and began to speak. "This isn't about politics," she said firmly. "This is about accountability. When someone who seeks to lead this nation speaks about rounding up families and targeting communities, we have to call it what it is: dangerous." The crowd fell dead silent. It wasn't just her words, it was her tone. Every syllable carried weight. Every pause demanded attention. It was the kind of speech that stopped people mid-scroll, mid-sentence, mid-breath. Within minutes, the clip began circulating online. Within an hour, millions were watching it on repeat. A reputation for courage. Those who knew Jasmine Crockett weren't surprised. Before joining Congress, she'd made her name as a civil rights attorney, fearlessly taking on tough cases, often against people with money, power, and deep connections. She had a reputation for being bold, for saying what others were too afraid to say. Critics called her too outspoken. Supporters called her the voice of truth. And that day, she lived up to that title. Crockett told reporters she hadn't planned to release the audio at first. She'd received it weeks earlier and wrestled with the decision. But the more she listened, the more she realized she couldn't stay silent. "I felt morally obligated," she said. "If something threatens the values this country stands for, we can't just sweep it under the rug. We have to face it." You could hear the conviction in her voice, not as a politician chasing headlines, but as someone who understood the weight of the moment. The explosion across America. By noon, the story had taken over every major network. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all running continuous coverage. Social media went into a frenzy. The hashtag Trump recording was trending worldwide. Clips of Crockett's speech spread like wildfire across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Political analysts were dissecting every second of it, while ordinary Americans debated in the comment sections, trying to make sense of what they had just heard. The full audio, uploaded by Crockett's team shortly after the press conference, sent shockwaves through the country. Trump's voice could allegedly be heard talking about immigration with alarming bluntness. His tone, cold, forceful, and unfiltered, was unlike anything the public had heard before. And as people listened, the reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage. Trump's team fights back. Within hours, Trump's legal team released a statement. They called the audio fake, doctored, and a desperate political stunt. A spokesperson claimed the entire story was built on lies meant to damage Trump's reputation ahead of his next campaign. But the denial didn't convince everyone. Several independent audio experts, including forensic specialists who analyze voice recordings, began examining the clip. Their early assessments were striking. One expert told a reporter, "The cadence, tone, and phrasing match Trump's speech patterns almost perfectly. If this is a fake, it's an extremely sophisticated one." Others pointed out that certain background noises in the recording, the clinking of glasses, muffled laughter, and the sound of Mar-a-Lago's distinct ambiance, matched known recordings from events held there. In other words, it sounded real. The twist that changed everything. But the real shock came later that evening. The Washington Post broke a new development, a story that would change everything. According to a former Trump aide who spoke on condition of anonymity, the meeting did happen. The aide refused to reveal who recorded it, but confirmed that Trump had gathered a small circle of confidants at Mar-a-Lago several months earlier. The aide refused to elaborate, but quietly said, "There was a lot of talk about immigration that night. The conversation got intense." That one confirmation was all it took. Suddenly, the debate wasn't about whether the tape existed, it was about what came next. Was there more audio? Were investigators already involved? And who else in that room might start talking? Crockett's defining moment. As the story spiraled, Jasmine Crockett's name dominated the headlines. Supporters praised her courage. Critics accused her of political theater. But one thing was undeniable. She had forced a national conversation that no one could ignore. By the end of the day, standing on those Capitol steps, she had done more than release a recording. She had drawn a line between silence and truth, between politics and principle. And for millions watching across America, it was clear. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just leaked a tape, she'd changed the game.
By morning,
America woke up to chaos. Social media was on fire. Timelines flooded with disbelief, anger, and endless debates. Hashtags like #Trump recording, Crockett leaks, and immigration truth dominated every platform from Twitter to TikTok. It didn't matter if you were a Democrat, Republican, or somewhere in between. Everyone had an opinion. Some called it a moment of reckoning. Others dismissed it as political theater. But one thing was clear. Jasmine Crockett's move had reignited the national conversation about immigration in a way no politician or campaign ad ever could. America in shock. As the sun rose, footage began to pour in from across the country. In downtown Los Angeles, protesters held handmade signs reading, "No more silence. Truth over politics." In New York, hundreds gathered outside City Hall, chanting Crockett's name. And in Dallas, Crockett's home state, crowds formed outside her local office, cheering her courage. Civil rights groups quickly joined in. The National Immigration Coalition called her a voice for transparency in a time of silence. Human rights activists praised her for breaking the code of political fear. For many Americans, she had done something few ever dared. She had gone head-to-head with one of the most powerful figures in modern politics and refused to back down. The Trump camp strikes back. Meanwhile, inside the Trump campaign headquarters, panic was brewing. Advisors huddled in closed-door meetings, strategizing how to contain the wildfire. By mid-morning, a statement appeared on Trump's official social media accounts. It read, "President Trump has always supported legal immigration and the protection of American borders. Any recording suggesting otherwise is a fabrication, part of a coordinated smear campaign by political opponents." But even as the statement spread, it failed to stop the storm. News anchors were already breaking down every word of the audio. Fact-checkers were comparing Trump's past speeches to the voice in the recording, and the similarities were impossible to ignore. Political analysts pointed out that the tone, pause, and word choice perfectly matched how Trump spoke during his rallies and private interviews. Within hours, multiple journalists from The Washington Post, Reuters, and NBC News confirmed that subpoenas were being issued to individuals who reportedly attended the Mar-a-Lago meeting. That meant one thing: the government was taking this seriously. Whispers inside Washington. Behind closed doors, Washington was buzzing. Lawmakers from both parties were fielding questions they didn't want to answer. What did they know? Who was in that room? And most importantly, was this the moment everything changed heading into the 2026 elections? A senior political strategist, speaking anonymously to the press, summed it up perfectly. If this tape is real, it's not just a scandal, it's a game changer. Because this wasn't just about what Trump allegedly said, it was about what it represented. If proven authentic, it could reveal a side of immigration policy discussions that had never been meant for the public. A side that was darker, harsher, and far more personal than the speeches seen on TV. Divided reactions nationwide. Across the country, reactions were split and intense. In conservative states, Trump supporters rallied in defense of their former president. Many believed the timing of the leak was too convenient, an attempt to derail his rumored comeback campaign. At one rally in Florida, a Trump supporter shouted into a news camera, "They'll do anything to stop him. This is fake. Every time he gets close to running, they pull something like this." But not everyone agreed. In cities like Chicago, Seattle, and Atlanta, immigrant communities held emotional gatherings. People shared stories of fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion from years of being at the center of political crossfire. A young woman from Texas, holding back tears during a live interview, said, If that's really what he said, then it's not politics anymore. It's personal. We're the ones living it. Her words echoed across social media, gaining millions of views and heartfelt responses from across the world. Media frenzy and global attention. By afternoon, international outlets picked up the story. BBC, Al Jazeera, and The Guardian all ran headlines about the Trump immigration recording. Foreign analysts called it one of the most significant political leaks of the decade. Even world leaders began weighing in subtly, some expressing concern over the tone of the recording, while others used it to criticize U.S. immigration hypocrisy. Inside America, the political temperature continued to rise. Congressional committees hinted at opening formal inquiries, and speculation grew that federal investigators might soon get involved. The White House, while avoiding direct comment, released a cautious statement urging transparency and verification before drawing conclusions. But by that point, the narrative had already escaped Washington's control. Jasmine Crockett, the reluctant hero. Through it all, Jasmine Crockett maintained a calm but firm presence. She didn't celebrate, she didn't gloat. Instead, she spoke once more to reporters late that evening, saying, "This was never about revenge. It's truth. The American people deserve honesty, no matter how uncomfortable it is." Those words resonated deeply. To some, she was a hero, to others, a troublemaker. But to everyone watching, she had become something bigger, a symbol of how one voice, when backed by courage, can challenge power itself. And as night fell across Washington, one thing was undeniable. The shock waves from this recording were only just beginning.
As the nation continued to debate and divide over the shocking recording, one thing became clear: the story was far from over. Across cable news, social media, and coffee shop conversations, people were grappling with what they had just heard. Some Americans were outraged, calling the alleged comments unacceptable and inhumane. Others insisted it was politically motivated, a distraction, or even a stunt. Amid all the chaos, Jasmine Crockett stepped forward once more, but this time without the flash of cameras or the glare of reporters. Instead, she shared a short, unedited video message on her social media platforms. The simplicity of the video contrasted sharply with the intensity of the day's headlines. Just Crockett, looking directly into the camera, speaking plainly but powerfully. When powerful people speak in secret about stripping others of their humanity, she began, her voice calm but unwavering, "It's not politics, it's a warning. And if I have to risk my career to make people aware, then so be it." The words hit deep. They weren't rehearsed sound bites or political rhetoric. They were a moral challenge, a statement that cut through the noise and asked the nation to reflect on the meaning of power, responsibility, and truth. The response was overwhelming. The reaction was overwhelming. Supporters of Crockett flocked to her social media pages, posting messages of gratitude and admiration. Comments ranged from heartfelt notes to calls for civic action. Fearless, brave beyond words, the voice we needed to speak up. Even some critics, who had spent the day questioning her motives, paused to acknowledge her courage. One political commentator tweeted, "Agree with her or not, she started a national conversation that can't be ignored." By nightfall, the short video had become the top story globally. Headlines from New York to London, Tokyo to Sydney were calling attention to her message, highlighting the fact that one person's courage had reignited a debate the country had long avoided facing head-on. From rising star to national symbol. In a single day, Jasmine Crockett had transformed from a rising voice in Congress to a symbol of defiance against secrecy and power. For years, politicians have made decisions behind closed doors, decisions that shape millions of lives. But few have had the courage to pull back the curtain and demand accountability. especially against someone as politically powerful as Donald Trump. Crockett's move wasn't just daring, it was historic. By choosing to release the recording, she forced the nation to confront uncomfortable questions. How should leaders wield their power? What is the line between policy and dehumanization? And who is responsible when secrecy hides potentially dangerous plans from the public? The global impact. The recording's reach extended far beyond Washington. International media picked up the story, emphasizing the courage of the individual who dared to speak out. News outlets in Europe, Asia, and South America highlighted Crockett's statement, framing it as a story about accountability, transparency, and democracy itself. In some countries, political analysts compared her actions to historic whistleblowers, ordinary people stepping up to confront extraordinary power. Meanwhile, inside the United States, journalists were digging deeper. Investigations were launched, inquiries opened, and questions about Mar-a-Lago's private meetings became the focus of both news cycles and political commentary. The weight of a single decision. For Crockett, this wasn't about fame, ratings, or political advantage. It was about morality, about the choice to speak out when remaining silent might have been easier, safer, or more politically convenient. She risked everything: her reputation, her career, and even the safety that comes with staying in the shadows. And in doing so, she reminded the nation of something often forgotten in modern politics: courage matters more than comfort. As the night stretched on, the impact of her decision became clear. Social media continued to buzz. Conversations around dinner tables and in online forums revolved not just around what the recording contained, but the bravery it took to release it. A defining moment in history. Political commentators, analysts, and everyday Americans alike began to realize something profound. This was more than a scandal about words or recordings. "We're witnessing history," one analyst said, "not because of what Trump said, but because someone had the courage to let the world hear it." History in that moment wasn't defined solely by power, influence, or political office. It was defined by a single person standing up for transparency and accountability. Whether the recording would ultimately be verified in full, or what consequences it might bring to the political landscape, one thing was certain: Jasmine Crockett had changed the conversation forever. From her calm, measured video message to her bold decision to release the recording, she had become the face of moral courage in modern American politics. A reminder that sometimes one voice is enough to make the world stop, listen, and think. And as the day came to a close, one truth was undeniable. The story of the recording was no longer just about Trump. It was about the power of one person to speak the truth regardless of the risk.